He is a man who remains unsurpassed to this day. Even though he was once bound in chains, he created 5 historical records that no one has ever surpassed. Riding his horse and wielding his whip, in an era that belonged solely to him, he overshadowed everyone else's brilliance. He left behind not only glorious military achievements but also 5 untouchable historical records. He is none other than the legendary Genghis Khan. The story begins when he was 9 years old. To resolve the enmity with a rival tribe, his father took Temujin to arrange a child marriage, hoping to bring peace. On the way, my father stumbled across an old herding friend and they decided to catch up. Perhaps it was fate, but Temujin met a girl he fancied named Borte. That night, Temujin told his father he wanted to stay and choose a bride. His father said that would offend the Merkit tribe, but young Temujin boldly replied, "They're not that strong. Why should we fear them?" His father laughed heartily, proud of his son's courage. His father had previously advised him to choose a bride who is fair and plump, with a face wider than a lake, and small eyes that can gather wealth. Most importantly, he emphasized that the bride's legs must be strong and sturdy because only a woman with powerful legs can bring double happiness to her husband. Soon, Temujin becomes infatuated with a girl and shares his chosen bride with his father. However, his father is disappointed as he had intended for Temujin to marry a girl from the rival Merkit tribe, in order to reconcile years of animosity. Unexpectedly, Temujin falls in love with a girl from the smallest tribe. Now, their situation becomes precarious, but Temujin remains immersed in the joy of finding a wife. Before leaving, he presents the girl with a crow bone ornament as a token of their bond, promising to return and marry her in 5 years. However, no one could have foreseen that this initially unfavorable alliance would shape Temujin's grand future plans. That night, a thunderstorm roared across the grasslands, and his father comforted Temujin, saying even the bravest Mongolian warriors fear thunder, as it represents the god's anger. Temujin couldn't have known that years later, lightning would help him overcome the greatest obstacle on his path to unifying Mongolia. On their way back to the tribe, they encountered people from a rival tribe. According to Mongolian customs, no blood should be shed where there is water, so both sides exchanged food as a gesture of peace. The other side offered a bowl of milk, and his father reciprocated with food. His man, seeing the hostile looks from the others, advised his father not to drink it, but he refused, saying it would break the grassland's rules, and drank it all. On the way back, his father succumbed to poison and fell from his horse. Temujin became the new Khan, holding his father's gradually cold body, returning to the tribe in grief. His former followers had already betrayed him, taking all the wealth and livestock, and even wanted to kill Temujin to eliminate future threats. Fortunately, Mongolian customs forbid killing children who are not yet as tall as a cartwheel, so Temujin narrowly escaped. As he left, Targutai said he would return in winter when Temujin had grown taller to kill him. To save his life, when winter came, Temujin fled to the bitterly cold sacred mountain, praying for the protection of the eternal blue sky. Perhaps the eternal blue sky heard his prayers, for when he fainted in the snow, close to freezing to death, he was saved by another boy. This boy was Jamuka. To thank him for saving his life, Temujin swore a blood oath with him, becoming brothers. From then on, they shared a common enemy, but good times didn't last long, and Temujin was found by Targutai's men. How could a child resist such a large tribe? Eventually, Temujin was captured. He was shackled and became the smallest slave. Targutai decided to keep him close, planning to kill him once he grew taller. One day, during a thunderstorm, Temujin took advantage of the guard's negligence and escaped again. He ran all the way to the sacred mountain, kneeling in prayer, hoping the gods would help him avenge his enemies soon. Not far away, a lone wolf watched Temujin. Before long, his shackles miraculously fell off. Years later, Temujin returned as a grown man, secretly vowing to reclaim everything that was his. But first, he had to fulfill his 5-year promise to Borte. Borte did not despise the down-and-out Temujin. Instead, she joyfully married him and followed him back to see his mother. But just as the family was reunited, the Merkit tribe's leader attacked with his men. Temujin fled with Borte, but unfortunately, he was struck by a cold arrow from the enemy. To protect her husband, Borte decided to sacrifice herself, fiercely whipping her husband's horse. Temujin managed to escape. Borte was quickly captured and became the wife of the Merkit leader. Temujin, now alone and weak, couldn't rescue Borte by himself, so he sought out his brother Jamuka, but Jamuka said Mongolians wouldn't fight for a woman, it's a rule of the prairie. Yet Temujin insisted on rescuing his wife, so Jamuka agreed to help but only after a year, and the servants must not know the campaign was to save a woman. A year later, the brothers led an army to attack the Merkits. The rocky hills were eerily quiet. Both brothers sensed something unusual, and sure enough, dozens of masked enemies suddenly emerged from behind the rocks. They were strong and fierce, even Jamuka struggled to fend them off. When Jamuka was knocked off his horse, he managed to block with his shield. As he was about to be overwhelmed, Temujin came to his aid. He tore off an enemy's mask and looked at Jamuka, and the brothers immediately understood each other. Jamuka fought even more bravely, while Temujin took the opportunity to infiltrate the camp. Though wearing a Merkit mask, he was still recognized, and after killing an enemy, he continued to search for his wife. Finally, he found his wife in a yurt after a year apart. His wife was heavily pregnant, but he didn't mind. At that moment, Jamuka arrived, and Temujin pointed to Borte's belly, saying, "This is my son." Jamuka examined it, glanced at the blood-stained knife nearby, and nodded with a smile. At the victory celebration that night, Jamuka wanted Temujin to stay and become the second Khan of his tribe. Temujin politely declined and distributed all the spoils to his men. This gesture won him many hearts. The next morning, Borte told Temujin, "There cannot be two tigers on one mountain," and Temujin seemed to understand, leading his men to leave first. Jamuka, being harsh, had many fearful subordinates, and even two generals, dissatisfied, chose to follow Temujin. When Jamuka heard the news, he pursued them, questioning why Temujin took his men. But Mongolians have the right to choose their leader, so Temujin didn't return them, causing Jamuka's brother to be very upset. To retaliate against Temujin, Jamuka's brother went to Temujin's tribe to steal warhorses but was shot dead by a guard. The guard, knowing he had caused trouble for Temujin, offered to give his head to Jamuka as an apology. Temujin knew his subordinate was only protecting the horses and had done nothing wrong, so he refused to punish him. Meanwhile, Jamuka, because of his brother's death, completely turned against Temujin. Jamuka allied with Targutai to attack Temujin. At the critical moment of life and death, Temujin let the old, weak, women, and children leave first. As they parted, Borte took out the crow's bone Temujin had given her, praying for his safe return. This was destined to be a losing battle, but the warriors showed no fear. Facing the overwhelming enemy, they not only didn't retreat but charged forward, fighting desperately. Until only Temujin was left on the battlefield. Jamuka didn't kill Temujin but sold him as a slave to a Western Xia merchant, Genghis Khan, Temujin's lowest point before unifying Mongolia. He was sold as a slave, and the Western Xia king immediately took a liking to Temujin.
多少钱？
是5吊子。这个家伙嘛，杀死了我的一个最好的一名卫士啊，真的。
But the monk beside him advised against buying him, saying he was no ordinary person. The Western Xia king didn't listen and insisted on buying Temujin. At that time, he couldn't have imagined that today's one would lead to the kingdom's downfall. The Western Xia king locked Temujin in a cage, making him an object of ridicule for all to see. Every day, he was exposed to the elements, barely having enough to eat. Even the dogs guarding the prison ate better than him. Temujin caught a pigeon, stuffed it into his mouth, and ate it raw, indifferent to those around him, doing what ordinary people couldn't. That's Genghis Khan. On a day of torrential rain, a monk came to the cage with an umbrella, begging for Temujin's forgiveness, hoping that in future invasions, they wouldn't destroy their temples. Temujin agreed, promising the monk, and took out the crow's bone, asking the old monk to deliver it to Borte. The monk traveled day and night, crossing desolate deserts and endless sands. After an unknown amount of time, the monk's aged body finally gave out, and he fell. On the other side, Borte seemed to sense something, and she brought her child to the monk's body. finding the crow's bone. She immediately understood Temujin's situation. She waited by the monk's body for a long time until a caravan arrived. Borte begged the caravan leader to take her to Western Xia. The leader looked at her greedily and demanded her body as payment. To see Temujin in Western Xia, Borte had to submit to the leader. Years later, Borte finally saw Temujin in the cage. At night, she bribed the guards and successfully rescued Temujin. Looking at the daughter that appeared out of nowhere, Temujin told the child, "From now on, I am your father." Then, with Borte and the two children, they escaped Western Xia. In his 30s, Temujin finally returned to the Mongolian grasslands, but the place had changed, with Mongolians pillaging and even harming children. Temujin, with the world in his heart, was eager to change the situation, so he bid farewell to his wife and children and set out again to unify Mongolia. He returned to the sacred mountain, asking the eternal blue sky for strength. The snow wolf from years ago appeared again, and under its gaze, he vowed to unify the grasslands. And he truly did, unstoppable. On the grasslands, only his former brother Jamuka could rival him. The two soon faced a decisive battle. Jamuka, with superior forces, chose to press with a large army, but Temujin only sent a cavalry charge. The cavalry, wielding double swords, spread their arms like blades, using the momentum of their horses to break into the enemy's formation. Wherever they went, enemies fell in rivers of blood, souls claimed by the blade. After breaking through the enemy, only 6 of them remained. Their final task was to lure the enemy into the range of the archers. Temujin ordered the archers to fire. A rain of arrows fell, and soldiers on the battlefield died in the chaos. Jamuka's vanguard was wiped out, and in anger, he ordered 100,000 troops to attack. Suddenly, the sky darkened with clouds, and thunder roared, enveloping the battlefield in darkness. The Mongolian warriors, terrified of thunder, were in chaos, but Temujin stood proudly on the grasslands like a god. With a wave of his long sword, the warriors surged forward. The result was inevitable. Temujin won a great victory and captured Jamuka. Looking at the man before him, he was filled with emotion. In his heart, he never saw Jamuka as an enemy but as a brother, so he chose to let him go because greater dreams awaited him in the distance. In 1206, at the age of 44, Temujin unified the Mongolian grasslands. His cavalry then swept through Western Xia, but he kept his promise, preserving the monk's temple. Later, with less than 300,000 troops, he gradually destroyed over 40 countries and conquered more than 270 ethnic groups. He established a superpower spanning the Eurasian continent. He is one of the rare conquerors in human history.